They say evil only lives where you let it, but something invite themselves in. My name is Michelle. Last week I found out the truth about my grandmother. That she wasn't just cruel, she was dangerous. She'd been using something old, something dark, and my mother was her target. We thought things were getting better. We were wrong because now it's my father who's slipping away. The next day, I couldn't focus. Not on homework, not on dinner, not on anything except the weight of those letters. And that voice in the back of my head whispering, she will live in a box. I needed to understand. Grandma Victoria had an other storage room no one ever entered, at the very top of the house, near the attic. It smelled like dust and dried roses. I went there again when she went out, pulled open an old oak chest that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Inside, a small rusted tin, no bigger than a jewelry box but heavier than it looked. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside were papers, old, brittle, stained with age and something darker. Beneath them, photographs, letters, a necklace with a broken chain, a lock of hair bound in red thread. But it was the photo on top that made my throat close. It was my mother, younger, maybe 20, standing stiff beside my father. He looked uncomfortable, his arm only half around his shoulders, and beside them, Grandma Victoria smiling, but not at the camera, at him. On the back of the photo, a date and a name, scribbled in ink that had run slightly with time. Engagement 2014 should have been me. I flipped through the letters next. They were all from Grandma. Some never sent, some torn, some burned at the corners. Confessions of love, of longing, of rage. She's nothing but a phase, Daniel. You'll see. We belong together. We always have. She's weakening you. She doesn't understand your power, but I do. If you won't leave her, I'll make sure she leaves you. My breath came faster. Beneath the letters, another doll, smaller than the first, cruder, as if it had been an early attempt, its threads loose, its face blank, but this one had his initials stitched into the back. TK, that's my father. And suddenly I understood. This hadn't started with my mother. Victoria hadn't just wanted to hurt Akosua. She wanted to own Dani, body and soul, the charm, the control, the silence. It was never just about revenge. It was obsession, possession, and the worst part? She'd almost succeeded. The face of the doll is hand-stitched, hair made of tight black wool, frizzed and patchy, and around its neck a thin red thread tied 3 times. A knot, a charm, or a warning. But what made my stomach flip was this: pins, tiny ones, jabbed into the arms and legs, one straight through the heart, and on the bottom of its dress, initials stitched in red thread. Akosua Owusu. I dropped it. My hands were shaking. This wasn't just racism. This wasn't just control. This was a curse, a quiet war. I backed away, bile rising in my throat. A creak. I froze. Then her voice, right behind me. You shouldn't be up here. I turned slowly. Grandma Victoria stood in the doorway, perfectly still. Eyes like cracked porcelain, calm and cruel. I was just looking for. She stepped forward, gaze flicking to the open box. Curiosity is dangerous, Michelle, especially when it leads little girls into rooms they're not meant to enter. I didn't speak. She knelt beside the doll, gently plucked it from the floor, and rewrapped it in the cloth with the care of someone cradling a child. This house has rules, she said softly, and those who break them don't always get to stay. She smiled then, a slow, practiced smile. Why don't you run along now? I fled down the stairs, through the hallway, into my room. I locked the door. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just sat on the edge of my bed, shaking. That doll wasn't just a toy, it was a threat, a symbol of power, twisted and hateful. And she made it. She made it for my mother. I knew then Victoria would never stop until she had my father all to herself, until Mom was gone one way or another, and if no one else was brave enough to stop her, maybe I had to be. At first, it was small things. Mom started losing her appetite. She would pick at her food like it was paper. Her hands trembled when she stirred the tea. She brushed it off as stress. Just tired, she said, and smiled with her lips but not her eyes. But I saw it. She was fading. 2 days after I found the doll, she started coughing, deep, racking fits that shook her whole chest. At night, I could hear her pacing. Sometimes I'd find her in the kitchen at 3 a.m., boiling ginger and cloves and muttering old Akan prayers under her breath. Dad didn't seem to notice, or maybe he didn't want to. He was quieter than ever, distant, eyes sunken, like he hadn't slept in weeks. I think she should see a doctor, I told him. He nodded slowly. Yes, maybe, but he never booked it. That night, I crept back to the attic. I had to see the doll again, had to know if it had changed. I lifted the lid of the box. The red thread around its neck was tighter now. The pins had shifted. One now stuck through the doll's lungs, right where Mom had been coughing. I backed away horrified. This wasn't just symbolism. It was a weapon, a quiet, hidden war, and the battlefield was my mother's body. I wrapped the doll in a black scarf and tucked it into the bottom of my backpack. I didn't tell anyone. That day at school was a blur. I couldn't focus. The doll in my bag felt heavy, not just in weight, but in presence, like it was listening. I walked the long way around town, past the pharmacy, down the quieter streets, to a modest brick church tucked between a laundrette and a hardware shop. Emmanuel Faith Chapel, it said above the door in fading blue paint, the kind of place people passed without noticing. But today, I needed it. Inside was dim and quiet, the air thick with candle wax and old prayers. A few plastic chairs, a wooden cross at the front and to the side, sweeping the floor with a slow, thoughtful rhythm, was the man I'd seen before. Elder Samuel. He looked up when I stepped in, and his eyes, warm but sharp, studied me for a moment. "Hello there," he said. "You're Daniel's girl, aren't you?" I nodded. "I need help," I said. My voice cracked on the last word, "Come." I followed him to a side room. No grand altar, just a table, 2 chairs, and the stillness of someone who'd seen too much to be afraid anymore. I placed the backpack on the table. My hands trembled as I pulled out the bundle. He didn't touch it at first, just stared at the scarf like he already knew what was inside. "Show me." I unwrapped it. The black doll lay there, stiff and unnatural, its button eyes stitched shut, its limbs tied with red thread. Something had been carved into the cloth, symbols I couldn't read, symbols that didn't want to be read. "This is a binding object," he murmured. "Not just a curse, a control tool. Someone fashioned this with full intention, to weaken, to silence, to remove. Can it be broken?" I asked. Elder Samuel looked at me, really looked. Yes, but you must understand, destroying the object is not enough. Whoever made this didn't do it alone. She would have spoken it into being, likely not once. Over time, that kind of hatred becomes ritual. Elder Samuel laid the doll in a shallow metal bowl and poured olive oil in a circle around it. Then he placed his hand on my shoulder. We'll begin tonight. I will fast. I'll pray. But you must cover your mother. Sleep near her. Watch for changes. And Michelle, don't let fear keep you quiet anymore. I swallowed hard. What if she finds out I took it? He gave a small, sad smile. She already knows. When I got home, Grandma Victoria stood there like she'd been waiting. In her pale blue blouse, pearls neat, lipstick perfect. But her eyes were searching. Home a bit late, aren't you? She said lightly, too lightly. I had after-school choir, I lied smoothly. Her gaze flicked to the backpack, still slung over my shoulder. Must be a new commitment. I don't recall it being on your schedule. I shrugged. Mr. Taylor started it last week. Said I had a good alto voice. She smiled. It didn't touch her eyes. How lovely. You must sing for us sometime. I will, I said. Then I turned and headed upstairs like I hadn't just lied to the devil's secretary. But I could feel her watching me, following me with her mind. The house held its breath for 3 days, and after that, Mom grew stronger. She ate, she laughed, she even argued with Dad about something trivial. And for the first time in months, he listened. He looked at her like he was seeing her again. Victoria said nothing, but she watched, always watching. The days passed like water leaking through a cracked jug. Slow, constant, impossible to stop. But as Mom got better, Dad's memory began to slip in chunks. He'd lose track of time, forget where he was. One afternoon, I found him standing barefoot outside the house, staring at the sky with a blank expression. "Did you see her?" he asked, voice hoarse. She was right there, on the roof. I followed his gaze. There was nothing there. "Come inside, Dad," I said softly, guiding him by the arm. Mom tried to be strong. She played his favorite music, read to him, cooked the things he used to love. But he barely responded anymore. The light in his eyes flickered, there one day, gone the next. And Victoria, she never spoke of it, not once. But I saw it, the way she hovered at doorways when he coughed, the way her hands twitched when he didn't look at her, the way she flinched when he called for Mom in his sleep. The next morning, Dad didn't come down for breakfast. At first, we thought he was just sleeping in, maybe catching up on rest after weeks of silent tension. But Mom asked me later to get him. When I got there, Dad was in bed, but he wasn't asleep. He was shaking, not like a chill, not like a fever, but violently, as if something inside him was fighting to get out. His skin was slick with sweat, his lips cracked and tinged blue, and his eyes wide, unblinking, staring at the ceiling like he was seeing something we couldn't. I called for Mom, and she rushed to his side, pressing a palm to his forehead. "Daniel! Daniel!" Mom gripped his shoulders. "Daniel, wake up, look at me." But he didn't blink, didn't move. His chest rose and fell in shallow gasps, like each breath was a war. His fingers curled into the sheets, twitching. I stood frozen at the door, watching. Mom turned to me. "Call an ambulance, now!" I ran, nearly slipping on the stairs. My fingers fumbled with the phone as I dialed. My voice cracked when I spoke to the operator, but I managed to get the words out. My dad's not responding. He's shaking and sweating, and please come. Grandma Victoria stood at the top of the stairs in her silver robe, shouting, "Quick, quick," pacing up and down. "Call the ambulance. I don't want Daniel to die." Her voice cracked like dry wood. Then she was running, silver robe flaring like wings, toward the room where my dad lay fighting for air. "He's blue," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "Oh God, he's turning blue." By the time the paramedics arrived, the house felt like it was holding its breath. They rushed into the room, their voices urgent but calm. "Sir, can you hear me?" one asked, shining a light into his eyes. No reaction. "He was fine yesterday," Mom said, voice shaking. "He's been tired, quiet, but never like this." One of them turned to her. "Has he had a seizure before?" "No," she whispered. "Never." They loaded him onto a stretcher, strapping oxygen to his face. At the hospital, they ran tests, scans, blood work. They couldn't find the cause. No stroke, no seizure activity, no infection. The doctors used words like psychogenic catatonic episode, stress-induced neurological response. I stood in the doorway, watching the doctors move like shadows around my dad's bed. Then the alarm went off. His body jerked, once, twice, then went still. "He's crashing," someone shouted. Hands pressed into his chest, tubes adjusted. A voice begged, "Come on, stay with us." But it was no use. Mom stood frozen, one hand over her mouth, the other gripping the wall. Her eyes were wide, empty, and then came the words I'll never forget. Time of death, 3:17 a.m. Just like that, he was gone. Grandma Victoria didn't scream. She stepped forward, placed a trembling palm on my dad's cooling forehead, and whispered something that made even the hardened nurse flinch. "You'll regret this." You didn't listen, and in that rising tension, she stormed off, her silver robe trailing behind her like a specter's shroud. No one spoke, but just before the nurse covered my dad's face, I saw it, a tear trailing from the corner of his eye, and beneath it, the faintest trace of a bruise. I never asked what really happened. Maybe I already knew.